I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner, and today I'm up on Capitol Hill as part of our Newsmaker series to interview Senator Lindsey Graham. It's great to be here. Senator, let's get right to it. You introduced legislation on immigration to strengthen the border. Tell us a little bit about the bill and why it was necessary.
Okay, number one, what the hell happened at the border? We need to continue to complete the wall, but people are coming and trying to be caught. The problem we have is that the Biden administration did two things at once that were terrible. The Trump administration had Title 42 authority under the CDC Act to deport anybody who shows up at the border because of COVID concerns. Whether you're an unaccompanied minor, you're a family coming here claiming asylum, you would be turned back because we have a COVID crisis. That's an amazing authority that was well used. So what did the Biden administration do early on? They gave an exception to Title 42 deportations for unaccompanied minors. Word is out in Central America that the policy has changed, that if an unaccompanied child comes to our border, they're not going to be sent back to their home country. They're going to be processed in the United States, and they're going to stay in the United States. That's why we are having a surge of unaccompanied minors. Now, what else happened? The Remain in Mexico policy. Trump said, if you apply for asylum in the United States, you're going to have to wait in Mexico to your court date. Well, because there's a 1 million-person backlog of cases, the average court date is 6 years away from the application. Under the old system, asylum seekers would apply for asylum, they would be released in the United States pending the court date, and they would never show up. So here's what Trump did. He convinced Mexico to allow these people to wait in Mexico. That way they did not have an entree to the United States. One of the first things that Biden did is change the unaccompanied minor provision of Title 42 and ended the Remain in Mexico policy. The reason so many people are coming to the border is they've heard that now you can apply for asylum in the United States, you'll be released in the United States, and 90% of them will never show up.
So has President Biden been reckless with border security in that he seems to be deciding what to do simply by doing the opposite of what President Trump did?
The definition of insanity is doing something the same and expecting a different outcome. Rejecting Trump policy because Trump did it is where we're at. It worked. The unaccompanied minor flow almost stopped because it got out in Central America that the children will not be allowed to stay in Mexico, in the United States. They will be sent back home. Nobody's going to pay $20,000 to travel to the U.S. border to wait in Mexico for 5 years.
Do you think that the Democrats want illegal immigration? And if so, why?
Well, some people want open borders. They believe we should take everybody in the world in, that all these folks are going to be Democratic voters. They hate the idea of deporting people. They hate the idea of border security. They hate the idea of walls. They really hate the idea of sovereignty. This is a sovereignty issue, folks. So what does my bill do? We do a couple things. We say that if a family comes to apply for asylum, they're going to be held together for 100 days, not 20 days, to give us a chance to process their claim. They're not going to be released, and if their claim is rejected, they're going to be deported. They'll never be allowed to be released in the United States, hoping they'll show up for their hearing. As to unaccompanied minors, we're going to change the law to say that the moment you arrive, you're going to be sent back to your home country. We'll look and see if there's any human trafficking issues here. But under our law, the only people we can send back to their home country are Canadian and Mexican children. Under our law, we can't send a child back to El Salvador. This bill changes that. The moment the planes land back in El Salvador and Guatemala with children that were sent back by the United States, the human traffickers are out of business. The moment that you understand when you apply for asylum, you have to apply in your home country or wait in Mexico for 5 years, people will stop coming to our border.
So I want to switch gears now to the question of identity politics, which seems to be something that the administration is absolutely fixated on. Tammy Duckworth and Mazie Hirono, both colleagues of yours in the Senate, have said that they will vote against any white nominee unless they are LGBT or Q. And it just seems to be that the whole administration is geared towards this. Do you think it's gone too far, group identity? And, this was a president who said he was going to unite the country. Does this divide the country, though?
E pluribus unum is dying as we speak, out of many one. So there's an effort by the radical left to cancel us all on the conservative side, that if you oppose H.R. 1, which is a corrupt politician act, allowing ballot harvesting and mandating universal mail-in balloting, you're a racist. So the bottom line here is that the elements controlling the Democratic Party are for open borders. The reason that Joe Biden is doing all these things, he's lost control of his party, and I find it to be the pathway back for the Republican Party. I think America is going to reject the idea that the only way you can be nominated is because of the color of your skin or your sexual preference. Let me tell you something that was in the COVID bill most people don't know. There's a provision in the $1.9 trillion COVID package where they would forgive farm loans to farmers, up to 120% of the value of the loan if you were socially disadvantaged. If you're a white woman owning a farm, you couldn't get a loan forgiveness. It was based on the color of your skin. There was no means test. You could be a billionaire person of color owning a farm, and your farm loan was forgiving. What does that have to do with COVID? That's reparations. There's a move afoot to categorize America in a fashion that I think divides us. There's a move afoot for reparations, and I think the Republican Party is on the right side of all these issues.
Let's turn our attention to guns. We've had a couple of terrible incidents just recently, but President Biden's instant response was to call for a ban on assault weapons, which is a sort of standard response. I want to ask you two questions about that. One is, should the Senate vote on a weapons ban? The second is, wasn't this an opportunity for the president to actually focus on the 95% or more of gun fatalities, which are with handguns, and to push back against the efforts to defund the police and say, actually, the protection of minorities means funding the police and making sure that crime is reduced? Well,
so what happened in the inaugural speech where you're going to bring us all together? Let's talk about guns for a moment. I want to vote on an assault weapons ban. I own an AR-15. Now, why do I own it? Because I have the right to own it and I choose to own it. The AR-15 I own has a medallion on it, my reserve unit. So it means a lot to me. But if there's a breakdown of law and order, there's a natural disaster, and the gangs are roaming through a neighborhood, what house do they go to the last? The one without a gun, the one with a double-barrel shotgun, or the one with the AR-15? So if there were a vote tomorrow to ban assault weapons, I'll make a prediction. A majority of the Senate would reject that vote. There are Democrats living in red states that cannot vote for an assault weapons ban. But every time there's a tragic shooting in this country, the left uses it as a reason to grab a gun of a lawful gun owner. And they accuse this man of being a white supremacist before they knew anything about the shooting. Turns out he's from Syria. Right. So Republicans are not going to give ground on the idea of banning the assault weapon. The weapon is not the problem, it's the mental health issues around people who use the weapon.
All right. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I want to just ask you a sort of almost like a personal question about President Biden. You worked with him in the Senate for 6 years. He seems to a lot of people to be either to have lurched to the left or else to be sort of floating on a left drifting tide. How different is President Biden from the senator who you knew and worked with here in the Senate building?
I haven't had a conversation with Joe Biden since he was elected. He called me up before the election while he was president-elect. Mitch McConnell hasn't talked to him. The Joe Biden that we know that would be a deal maker, that would find a way forward on an infrastructure bill, is AWOL or doesn't exist. I don't know what's happened to the Biden administration. Their policy choices along the border are tragic and dangerous. The agenda they're pushing is the most radical in the history of American politics. The idea of the Equality Act would require basically every girls' sports program would have to allow biological males to play if they identified themselves as a female. It would destroy girls' athletics. This is the most radical group I've ever seen since I've been up here. Joe Biden no longer exists as we know it. If he does exist, he needs to reemerge and reassert. The first thing Joe Biden should do, President Biden, should go to the border and see it for yourself.
Final question. Do you think then that he's really in charge, or is somebody else pulling the strings?
Clearly, he's not in charge. You know who I think is in charge? The people who are going to primary Schumer own Schumer. Chuck Schumer is pushing for DC statehood. He's pushing for the end of the filibuster. If he doesn't, he would get fired. Nancy Pelosi is on thin ice in the House. AOC, Bernie Sanders, this radical element of the Democratic Party is holding everybody hostage, and Joe Biden seems to be unwilling, incapable of standing up. He could be a consequential president. There's a way to get an infrastructure bill that Republicans would buy into. There's a way to get the DREAM Act passed, but you can't legalize one person right now until you fix the flow problems. If we pass the DREAM Act, can you imagine what signal that would send to everybody in Central America? They just legalized 1 million people. Let's run, we'll be next. You've got to stop the flow. Then we can talk about fixing the DREAM Act and other parts of immigration. Right now, Joe Biden seems to be along for the ride, and the game plan is to run us over. Not to find common ground with Republicans, but use reconciliation, changing the structure of the Senate to pass the most radical agenda in the history of the country. And in 2022, here's my advice to the American people. If we have one more Republican, he would have to talk to us. If we had the House, he would have to talk to us. The only way you're going to get Joe Biden talking to Republicans, I think, is for the Republicans to take over either the House or the Senate in 2022, which would be a good thing for the country.
22 months of hard work.
22 months of hard work, and I don't sleep well right now because we're hanging by a thread when it comes to the filibuster. H.R. 1 is transformational. It changes elections to be run by the federal government, a partisan FEC commission. The Equality Act would destroy women's athletics as we know it. The COVID bill had a lot to do with things other than COVID. And they're going to transform this country to the point you won't recognize it. If we can hold the line for another 20 months and take back the House or the Senate, we can stop this. So I hope people are understanding that the future of the country is in your hands. Show up in 2022.
Thanks very much, Senator, for your time. Thank you.